My father passed away last spring. He was 93 years old. Until his very last day, they say he sat in that old wooden chair, gazing out at the sea beyond the window. A neighbor called to tell me. She said she tried to wake him, thinking he had fallen asleep, but he would not rise. I was in Seoul at the time, in the middle of a meeting. That is my final excuse. He spent his whole life looking at that sea. Whenever I asked why Sokcho, he would answer in just a few words. "It's the closest place," he said. I never understood what he meant. Not until I read this diary. I didn't even know he kept a diary. We had lived together for over 60 years. I found it while clearing out his room, beneath the bed, inside an old box, covered in dust. There were 12 volumes in all, from 1937 through 2022, nearly 90 years of a life, beneath that bed. When I opened the box, I could not move for a long time. Everything my father had carried alone, in silence, his whole life, was there. The first line was just 5 words. Spring 1937. Cheongjin, my father's hometown. Cheongjin, North Hamgyong Province. The moment I saw those words, something rose in my chest. My father was 7 years old that year. The heart of Japanese colonial rule. What was he seeing? What was he feeling? I slowly turned the page. The diary begins, spring 1937. As I read my father's handwriting, the scenes appeared before my eyes. The dirt path that young father walked along every morning. The hillside where azaleas bloomed. The chimneys sending up smoke every morning as rice was cooked before dawn. Father wrote this: "When I walked holding mother's hand, nothing in the world frightened me. As long as I held that hand, I could survive anything." I stopped at those words for a long time. The word father used for his mother, in the old northern dialect, was one I had never once heard him say aloud in my lifetime. But in this diary, it appeared on almost every page. Mother said, "Deoksu, hurry up. We can't be late to Yamamoto's fields." Young Deoksu asked, "Mother, do we have to go to that field again today?" Mother said nothing for a moment. Then simply, "Yes," Deoksu asked quietly. "Mother, don't we have our own field?" Mother's step, just for one beat, stopped. Then she walked again, with a small, bitter smile. "We did," she said softly. "We had one. Then what happened to it?" the boy asked. Mother did not answer. She only held his hand more tightly and kept walking. Father wrote of that silence. When mother didn't answer, that was always the most accurate answer. Yamamoto, a Japanese landlord. He owned more than half the land in father's village, taken through a law called the Land Survey Ordinance, with nothing but a single document. They demanded proof of ownership for land our ancestors had farmed for generations. What certificate could a poor Korean farmer ever have? And so they lost their land and became tenant farmers on it, surrendering half the harvest, living on what remained. The diary contained this passage. They took it in the name of the law, with a single document. That is the worst kind of thief, the one who takes everything, without firing a single shot. In the field that afternoon, the Japanese supervisor walked between the rows. He came close to Mother. He said to her, "If this child isn't working, don't bring him." Mother grabbed Deoksu's hand and whispered, "Don't look at him." "Why?" the boy asked quietly. "Just don't look," she said. "Please." The boy lowered his eyes to the ground, but his hand, slowly, clenched into a fist. Father wrote of this scene. Mother told me not to look. I didn't look, but my hand clenched into a fist. That was all I could do. I read those words and sat motionless for a long time. My father's childhood. I had never once imagined it. To me, father had always been a quiet, distant man, that the boy who clenched his fist at 7 years old was my father. I until this diary. At lunchtime, Mother handed Deok-su a small ball of barley rice. He asked, "What about you, Mother?" She smiled and said, "I'll eat mine a little later. Go on, eat and get to school." The boy ate. Mother ate nothing. She stared at Yamamoto's house in the distance, the smell of proper food drifting over. Mother often went hungry, the diary says. Father wrote, "When Mother said she would eat later, that meant she was going without. I didn't know it when I was young. I understood when I passed 30, and then I wept for a long time." I wept too, reading those words. At the same moment, Father had wept alone, 30 years old, somewhere far away. I wept with him, 60 years late. What it meant to live in North Hamgyong province in those years, I had known only from what I'd been taught in school. But reading Father's diary, I felt it for the first time, truly felt it. That the numbers in the history books were human beings, that one of those human beings was my own grandmother. Father wrote, "Mother never cried, not in front of me, not once. She must have wept alone at night. I knew, but I pretended not to know. There was nothing else a 7-year-old could do." That evening, the dinner table was set. 2 potatoes, bean sprout soup, a little barley rice. 3 people sat down. 1 seat was empty. Deok-su asked, "Mother, when is Father coming back?" Mother's spoon stopped for a moment. She said, "He'll come soon." His older brother, Deok-man, said quietly. "Don't lie to him," Mother said. Deok-man looked up and said, "Father was taken for forced labor. We already know. You don't need to hide it." A long silence fell. Mother slowly set down her spoon. Her eyes were red. She forced a smile and said, "Let's just eat." Grandfather Kim Bong-chol. He was taken away when Father was 5 years old. Forced labor. Japan needed men to work the mines for its war. And so they took them. Tens of thousands. Like my grandfather. No one knew where he had gone. Later they heard it was Sakhalin. And then he never came back. Not even after the war ended. Not even after liberation. Whether he lived or died, we still do not know. Even now, Father's diary held only one line about him. "That is all I will write about Father. I cannot write any more." That single line felt longer than any other sentence in the entire diary. That night, Mother sat by the lamp sewing. Deok-su lay with his head in her lap. Deok-su asked, "Mother," she said. "Yes," he asked. "Why are we so poor?" Her sewing hands stopped. She thought for a long time. Then she said, "Deok-su," he said. "Yes," she said. "Being poor is not our fault. Do you understand?" He asked. "Then whose fault is it?" Mother did not answer. Instead, she slowly stroked his head. Deok-su said, "When I grow up, I'll earn a lot of money and give it all to you, Mother." Mother's hand stopped. A long, old silence. Father wrote of that night. Mother wept that night. I knew, but I pretended not to. That was all a 7-year-old could do. I understood, reading that passage, why Father had always been so quiet throughout his life, why he never showed his feelings to anyone. From the age of 7, he had learned to pretend not to know, because that was how you survived. In the autumn of 1938, a Japanese teacher stood at the front of the classroom. "All Korean students must now take Japanese names," he announced. One by one, the children raised their hands and said their new names. When the teacher reached young Deok-su, the boy sat still and said nothing. The teacher's voice rose. "Say your name." The boy kept his eyes forward and did not speak. Father was beaten that day. He wrote in his diary, "It hurt greatly, but I had no regrets." Father was able to keep his name because of grandmother. She went to the school herself. She said, "I gave my child that name, even when the police came, even when the landlord pressured her." Grandmother never yielded. Father's diary contained this passage. That one stubborn act became my pride for the rest of my life. No matter what happened, I was always Kim Deok-soo, in the German coal mines, in the jungles of Vietnam, in the deserts of the Middle East. I was always Kim Deok-soo. One spring evening, Deok-soo came home holding an azalea flower. He held it out to Mother with both hands and said, "Mother, a flower." Mother took it. She looked at it for a long time. Her eyes glistened. She said, "Thank you, Deok-soo." He said, "You have to smile, don't cry." She smiled and said, "I understand." Father picked azaleas every spring and brought them to grandmother. The diary said, Mother always smiled before those flowers, even in poverty, even in hardship. Before azaleas, she always smiled. I loved that smile. After reading this, I looked at the window. There was a vase of azaleas on the sill of Father's room. Dried flowers, picked perhaps last spring, withered completely. I could not throw them away. They are still there, right now. That autumn, 7 young men were taken from Father's village alone. Of those 7, only 2 returned after liberation. The rest, like grandfather, were never heard from again. Father's diary described that day. After that day, laughter disappeared from our village. Only the sound of women calling their husbands' names and weeping. I was afraid. I feared that one day they would come for me too. Father felt that fear at 9 years old. 9 years old. One night, older brother Deok-man put down his book and looked at Deok-soo. He asked, "Deok-soo, what do you want to be when you grow up?" Deok-soo said, "I want to earn money. I want to make things easier for Mother." Deok-man gave a bitter smile and said, "That alone won't be enough." Deok-soo asked, "Then what?" Deok-man said in a low, firm voice, "The world has to change. We have to be able to live as the rightful owners of our own land." Then he said, "Remember just one thing, Deok-soo." Deok-soo asked, "What?" Deok-man said, "Being poor is not our fault. Never be ashamed of it." Young Deok-man, 3 years older than Father, in the June 25th war, he was conscripted into the People's Army. And then all word of him stopped. Father's diary had only one line about his brother. "I do not know where Deok-man went. That was all. I did not know, until this diary, that a great uncle had existed. Father never mentioned him once. Too painful to speak? Or did he think, what would be the use? I do not know. I can no longer ask. But his brother's words appear again and again in the diary. Being poor is not our fault. Never be ashamed when covered in coal dust in the German mines, when hearing gunfire in the Vietnamese jungle, when hauling cement under the Middle Eastern sun." Father repeated those words, even after his brother vanished, for the rest of his life. Those words kept Father alive. Today I finished reading the first volume of the diary, from the spring of 1937 to liberation in 1945. Father's childhood, from age 7 to age 15. As I read, for the first time, I understood how little I had known about my own father. He was always there, when I was in middle school, when I entered university, when I joined the company, when I became an executive, and yet, I never once asked about his past, what kind of childhood he had lived, what he had feared, what had caused him pain. I never asked. The second volume begins on a date I recognized at once, August 1945, the day liberation came. I read the first line. Liberation has come. I wept. For the first time, I wept aloud. The next line read, but the joy did not last. Father, now I understand why you were always so quiet, why you never showed your feelings, why every morning you rose before dawn to gaze at that sea. inside you was a world I had never imagined. The field where a 7-year-old boy clenched his fist. The dirt path walked hand in hand with mother. The hillside where azaleas bloomed. Everything father carried in his chest his whole life was here, inside this worn old diary. I slowly opened the second volume. August the 15th, 1945. Liberation came. Father was 15 years old. The villagers poured into the streets. They wept and laughed and held each other close. Father wept too. He believed grandfather would return. He believed he could live again, with grandmother by his side. But the joy did not last. After liberation came division, and a far greater war was on its way. Episode 2. Preview. The spring of liberation was brief.